Just as Ezekiel Elliott returns for championship week in fantasy football, stars like Antonio Brown and Aaron Rodgers won't be when owners need them the most. Such is life as a fantasy football GM and his wife building a solid bench can win or lose you the title. Todd Gurley helped owners win big last week. Can he repeat the feat? Speaking of Gurley, is he the odds-on favorite to be the first pick in the 2018 draft? We'll give you our opinions, including who to start and sit for the final week of 2017 as OFN Fantasy Football on the Orleans Football Radio Network starts now. All right, I'm Greg DePalma. Welcome to a final Sunday game day morning edition of OFN Fantasy Football for December 24th, 2017, Christmas Eve. Hope everybody has a great Christmas. Early present for everyone, especially the ones in championship week. We'll see if they get it. Of course, tomorrow we have 2 games on Christmas. That's pretty awesome. Let's introduce, first of all, longtime sports producer and fantasy expert Dan Weinrich to the program. And Dan, how's the season coming to an end for you? How many more championship? I know you have one in our league. So how many other championship games you got?
2 others, so 3 total. I entered 6 leagues. I am in 3 championships.
That works.
So that works. So
Awesome.
if I win 1, I'll be happy. If I win 2, I'll be ecstatic. And if I win 3, it'll be the greatest day in my life, including the birth of both of my children.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same boat, of course, 50-50. So I've had 2 leagues. I'm in a championship. I was able to get by last week. It's funny. I had in both semifinals I was in last week, I went up against Todd Gurley in both.
Wow.
So I survived one of them. Did not survive the one in our league. So that was major destruction. Boy, that was something else, huh? Todd Gurley, especially. It wasn't just Todd Gurley's. It wasn't just the fact that he did so well, at that point of the season, but he did it against Seattle. I mean, that was something pretty unexpected, which is why when you have a great player, bottom line is you just never worry. Or even if you have a really good player, you don't really worry about the matchup.
Yeah, and a lot of top tier running backs had huge weeks. Todd Gurley, Mark Ingram, Kareem Hunt, and definitely noteworthy to score 4 touchdowns against the Seahawks. But I wouldn't be surprised if Ezekiel Elliott does something similar today against the Seahawks. They're obviously, you can't lose your two best players on defense and expect the defense to be the same.
Yeah, the good thing, though, which is much different from last week's Seattle defense, is the fact that you get KJ Wright back and Bobby Wagner's off the injury report. So that's huge for the run defense. So plus, I don't think it's a good idea to be spouting out about rushing for 200 yards against a prideful team like the Seahawks.
Yeah, maybe not. We'll see. But, bulletin board material is one thing, and being a freak of nature is another. And I think that's what Ezekiel Elliott is. And I think he's just he's going to be an unstoppable force today.
All right. We'll disagree. I think he'll have a decent game like he always does, but I'm not expecting anything anywhere close to what Todd Gurley gave us last week. And I guess the question then I think that should be on everybody's minds should be about who could be the number 1 pick next year. It's been a while, really, if you think about it, since we've had a really competitive top 5, as far as the draft, where you can go in a bunch of different directions. And next year, if you're already looking at the draft, you're thinking, wow, I mean, you got Todd Gurley, you got Zeke, you got Bell, you of course, you got Johnson coming back. You could throw in Antonio Brown, obviously. And I bet you there's going to be some people out there that, not as a top pick, but there'll be people out there that'll go, hey, I like what I saw to Kareem Hunt. And where does Saquon Barkley fit in?
I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, you're definitely nailing it with. I think Zeke will be right up there at the top, as well as Bell, and Antonio Brown is a perennial top five guy. He's just every year for the past 5 years, he's been the best wide receiver in football. So that's always a safe bet at the top. But yeah, it's definitely, forgive me, I'm still a little focused on this season with three big matchups today. But I think Todd Gurley has definitely reestablished himself as a top five guy. It's funny because
He was getting picked as the top guy a couple years ago, wasn't he?
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, 2 years ago he was in top. I know he was. I can't remember exactly if he was top five. I know he was in the top 10 for sure. He's definitely a first round guy. But he struggled last year under Jeff Fisher's reign, and he's been freed under Sean McVay, and he's definitely lived up to the hype this year. I think, pretty sure he's the top ranked running back so far, with Le'Veon right on his heels.
Big decisions.
But
these guys
are definitely. I mean, like you said, you went against two guys who had Gurley last week, and you had two games last week. It just goes to show that as teams, Gurley, a good percentage of them made their playoffs because of his play.
And look, I mean, I think next year anybody that drafts like 5 or 6 isn't going to feel that bad. They're going to be like, oh, okay. You mean I can sit here and I can get I can get David Johnson. I can sit here and get Antonio Brown or Kareem Hunt just sitting here at number 5. Okay, I'm happy with that.
I think another guy who has reestablished himself as a first round pick is DeAndre Hopkins. He was pretty much.
Especially with Deshaun Watson coming back, absolutely.
Yeah, so and I mean, even without him, even with the horrible quarterback play he's had of T.J. Yates or is that just T.J. Yates in Arizona? I'm getting the backups confused.
No, you're right with Yates.
I am right with it. Okay, so Yates and Macho Man Tom Savage. He still put up numbers just a little bit, half a step behind Antonio Brown, but far and away the second best wide receiver in fantasy football. So yeah, he's definitely going to be a first rounder. I think a really interesting guy for next year is Alvin Kamara, because can a guy who's not the main carrier as a running back be a first round pick? He certainly produced like one this year, so it'll be interesting to see where he's ranked next season.
Yeah, and look, fact is though, you're gonna feel pretty good if you made the semifinals this year and you end up with 7th or 8th pick, and you're gonna get somebody that could be the first pick at any given year. So next year is going to be huge in the first round. No matter where you pick, you're probably going to end up with somebody that could easily end up as the best player. All right, so we didn't really get anything from yesterday's games. Yesterday was pretty boring. Not just the games itself, but the fact that there really weren't a lot of impact fantasy players participating. You might have had a player or two with Baltimore. And as far as, of course, Collins would have been at the top of the list. And then in game 2, that was a tough situation to go into your fantasy championship week with if you had some key Vikings, under those weather conditions. But at least Diggs came through with a touchdown if you had him.
Yeah, and Latavius did okay. I had him going in one of my leagues, in my standard scoring league, and I think he got me like 8 points. So that's okay in this league. Obviously, it's not great, but it could have been worse considering the Vikings' final score. And but I also did have Baltimore's defense in 3 leagues, and they were actually a little disappointing. I think they also scored like 8 or 9 points across all of my leagues. That was a little bit disappointing. Also disappointing, I went against Minnesota's defense in one league, and they pitched a shutout. So they obviously depending on your league, they're probably going to be the number one, number two scoring defense this week. So unfortunate to go against them. I did also have Alex Collins starting in one league. I had Mike Wallace starting in one league. They all put up okay numbers, nothing special. So that other kid, that other running back, not Danny Woodhead. What is his name? Chandler Candezzaro? No, that's the kicker.
Oh, you're talking about the receiver, Campanaro?
Campanaro. Yeah, I don't think too many people had him starting this week, but if you did, good for you. Maybe in daily. He scored at least once. Did he score 2 touchdowns?
No, he got two. I don't know. He did have one.
No.
I don't know if he had two or not, but yeah,
Well,
there were a lot
like
of field goals. Oh yeah. Well, nobody.
But
had
you know, between when you've got Alex Collins, Buck Allen, and Danny Woodhead, and then all of a sudden this guy scores a touchdown, it's like, you know, you can't win.
No, well, that's why you try to stay away from Baltimore Raven players. That's for sure. All right, so a lot of games today. We got the 2 games tomorrow, and hey, look, that's going to impact a lot of championships tomorrow. The final games and the final day, because you're going to have Le'Veon Bell, who I have on my team. So a lot of people are going to have Le'Veon Bell. And boy, what a disaster for a lot of teams that had Antonio Brown. I mean, that's just a nightmare scenario to have a player like Antonio Brown, as you're trying to win a championship, go down like he did last week.
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, fantasy, even more than the NFL, is next man up. And, you know, that's why you try to have strong bench options, so that you can weather that storm. But that's definitely brutal. I personally don't have him in any leagues, but I do have Ben. And I've been debating quite a bit this week, whether or not I should start Ben or Drew Brees.
Oh.
And
well, that would also depend on what happens with Michael Thomas.
Yeah, well, I think regardless, I feel like I'm going to start Ben.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he just outscored Brees all season, and Houston really stinks. And, you know, he's got guys to throw. He still has Le'Veon and Juju and Martavis. They can all have big games. And I think the problem with the Saints is they just run the ball so darn much that there's not usually a lot of room for Brees to get points.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, definitely you're going to have to rely on some secondary guys moving up the depth chart. Everybody moves up one. I guess Juju becomes a 1, Brian a 2. But yeah, it's I don't know. It's kind of iffy. And then they're on the road, but yeah, Houston's pretty done right now. So you would think potential blowout in the game. So that's New Orleans though, they're at home. If Thomas does play. It's a tough call. Definitely is. I mean, it would also. Don't you think sometimes it also depends on whether or not, like, if you had started one of those 2 quarterbacks for like 4 straight weeks, wouldn't you be in a situation where if you had a tough call, you just go ahead and stick with the guy that you started the previous 4 weeks and say, look, why would I'm not going to sit the guy now. I mean, he's done well for me. Yes, it's a tough call, but I mean, why second guess myself? Just keep the guy in.
Well, that's how I feel about that. That would be Ben.
Okay.
Ben has been starting for me, and he's been outscoring Brees for the most part for the last 4 or 5 weeks. So,
okay.
The question is, do you think that? I mean, obviously Antonio Brown is the best wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah,
thinking,
that's huge.
It should have an effect on him.
Yeah.
If the team he's playing against stinks.
Yeah. But
and he's got other good receivers, and he should still have.
But look,
I mean, what do you think of it this way? What do you think is going to happen in that game?
Well,
you think Pittsburgh's going to win by double digits?
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh wins the game. They cover the game. The only thing is, though, I mean, it's kind of hard for me to think that. I don't know. I mean, I don't envision. I mean, I can see Ben throwing, have decent yardage and spreading it around. It wouldn't shock me to see him have 1 to Juju, and maybe Bryant finally scores the touchdown, and maybe even he throws to the tight end. He can do that. Ben can throw those touchdowns inside the 5-yard line to his tight ends sometimes. So yeah, I could see that. And look, Michael Thomas, if he doesn't play, you're done. You don't even have anything to debate. Because if Michael Thomas does, and I tell you right now, considering Michael Thomas is 50-50 at this point in time, and you've had Ben go as long as you've had him go, maybe that's the decision right there is already made up for you. Because even if Thomas plays, I mean, how confident can anybody be that he's going to really be effective? I mean, nobody knows.
Right. So they'd both be losing their top guy.
And Atlanta is a lot better than Houston.
Yeah.
So,
and the second and third guy on Pittsburgh are more impactful
than the Saints.
Than the counterparts on the Saints.
Yeah.
Being,
and
I guess Ted Ginn and I don't know, Willie Snead or Coleman.
Yeah, Coleman and Snead, yeah. And again, and the other thing too is, and I think this is always a little bonus, cherry on top, which is the fact that it's that game's on Monday.
Right.
The other game's on Sunday, so you can kind of sit back, get through all the Sunday games, and then maybe sit there and
really
count the points. Yeah, concentrate
really.
on one guy. And go, all right, go get him, Ben.
Send all your juju, no pun intended.
Yeah.
All your mental forces for your one guy.
So that's
one thing, just to button what you were saying about Antonio Brown, who lost him. The one silver lining is, being that we're so far into the playoffs, the waiver wire is not that active, and there are some decent fill-ins. You might want to consider. First of all, you might look for Martavis, because he's only owned in about half a league. So by some chance he's available, just grab him and slot him into your lineup. But also, maybe you want to take a look at Eli Rogers. He was definitely more involved once Antonio went down.
As a pickup and starter? Yeah, you think you would start him possibly? It all depends.
I mean, hopefully you have a better backup than that. But who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe you just squeaked in with your starters at wide receiver, and then all the rest of your strength is at running back or something. And maybe you need to pick up like a Kendall Wright off the Bears. He's been pretty consistent the last few weeks. Obviously, Marquise Goodwin's been great, although I think he's questionable, so you might want to check his health status. But all hope is not lost. Don't give up. I've seen stranger things happen.
All right, now, and if I actually have in my championship game, I had a decision to make, and I've already made it, but it was a little bit. I actually thought about it only because of the matchup, and that is, of course, I start Brandon Cooks every week. Why wouldn't I? And then I had Dion Lewis and also Jonathan Stewart. Now, of course, I love the matchup with Stewart and the Panthers going up against the Bucks. With all the injuries the Bucks have right now, you would think that the Panthers should be able to run all over them. But you kind of thought the same thing last week with the Packers. It didn't happen, and therefore, you got Brady, you got the Pat offense, you go with Dion Lewis. You feel confident he's always going to give you somewhere between 8 and 13 points. In regular leagues. And then, of course, Brandon Cooks, it worried me a little bit because of the fact that, he can be shut down against a team like Buffalo, which he was last time. But you got to go with him because he's so explosive and they have such a big time offense that it's really one of those things that if anybody's out there and you have that kind of a similar decision, of course, it all depends on who the other players are. I think if you had somebody better options than a Dion Lewis or a Jonathan Stewart, I think it could be interesting. But I think if you go for a player every week throughout the entire season and you never bench him and you're sitting there in your championship game and you're looking and you see Cooks did nothing against the Bills in the first matchup. The Bills have one of the best pass defenses in the league. I don't think you should second guess yourself in one of those situations. What do you think?
Nah, you gotta start the guys that got you there for sure. I mean, maybe. I have this one league where I have a big group of receivers that are, I have Alshon Jeffrey, Larry Fitzgerald, Devontae Adams, and Marquise Goodwin, and Mike Evans.
Okay.
And so week to week, I'm debating this guy or that guy. If
Yeah.
it's a situation like that
Yeah,
where
that's
you
different.
have
Yeah.
somebody who's very comparable, that's one thing. You know, you're taking, you're starting maybe a guy who's ranked number 8, say, over a guy who's ranked number 5, because you have a feeling, all right, that you can live with that. But you're gonna just take a flyer on a guy and start him over your stud. It's going to be really hard to live with that decision if it goes wrong. So I recommend starting your studs.
All right, now in some of these other key decisions out there, Matthew Stafford. Now it all depends on whether or not he's been your starter all year, or you definitely because we've talked a lot about him and we put him equated him with some other quarterbacks. He's been kind of on the fence a lot of weeks, and this is just another one of those weeks, depending on who it is that you're matching him up against, because you've got the offensive line issues that he's got to deal with. And now you got a Bengal team playing their final home game, probably with Marvin Lewis at coach. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it's the final home game potentially for Marvin Lewis. And lo and behold, all these Bengals came back to practice, all of them mostly on defense. That would worry me a little bit about choosing Matthew Stafford. I mean, I have no alternative because in my other league, I had Carson Wentz as my starting quarterback. He went down, and Stafford's my backup, so I go with him. But, if you've got a decision out there, that's a tough one, depending on who the other quarterback is.
Yeah, I mean, I would rank Stafford as a low end starter, low end wide receiver one, somewhere in the like number 10 range at his position this week. So if you have to start him, he'll probably put up numbers. I'm not even a healthy Cincinnati defense doesn't intimidate me that much, and Marvin Lewis's last game, yeah, I'm sure they love their coach, but it's also sort of an admission of it not meaning anything. So there could be some lethargy. Either way, I think you'll be okay. I'd be shocked if they just shut
Nah,
Stafford
yeah,
out.
shutting him down, no. Yeah. I mean, he should be. The thing is will he throw his touchdown passes? That's the thing that has really limited Stafford from being a top 5 quarterback this year, is that he doesn't have the guys that he can count on in the end zone. And he also doesn't have enough balance on offense. So he throws for a lot of yardage, but he just doesn't also usually. I mean, sometimes sometimes you get either or. Like if he throws for 180 yards, he'll throw a couple touchdowns. But sometimes when more often than not, it seems like when he's throwing for 300 yards, you're lucky to get a touchdown pass. So as far as Carolina, they have again, we talked about with Stewart, they've got a really good matchup because I just can't imagine McCoy and David are playing, and they've got other guys out. So it should be an easy offensive game for Cam Newton and the Panthers. Funchess looks like he's going to be playing. Greg Olsen had a big week last week. So if you're in a tight end league, you should feel pretty good about starting Greg Olsen.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm starting him in one of my championship games, and actually in the flex, because I have Travis Kelce in that league. So I'm starting 2 tight ends in one of my championship games.
Okay.
Because I expected a big game out of Greg Olsen today.
All right, I would agree with that. And other injuries to keep an eye on with the Jags. Now, would you do anything with the Jag receivers? Because Lee's out, Hearns is kind of iffy, and then you got those other kids that have pretty much come from nowhere. The backup receivers. You are going up against the Niners. And yeah, Bortles is probably playing the best football of his career right now. So would you start any of those guys on the Jags? Any of those receivers?
Well, I mean, it as always depends what else you have. If you're if you're in a situation like we were talking about before, where you're missing Antonio Brown, then I definitely think Westbrook or Cole are good options. I'd probably say Westbrook first, but they're not that far apart. And, they're in the same sort of range as like a Nelson Aguilar, Robbie Anderson, Rashard Matthews. Probably a low end wide receiver 3, but definitely not. You could do a lot worse.
And with Atlanta, we've been hearing all week about Julio Jones and his injuries. There's no reason for us to doubt that he's going to play, though. So that's interesting. You got Thomas on one end and Jones on the other end, and both of those guys are banged up in a huge game.
Yeah, I mean, they're both, two of the best receivers in the league, and I expect if they're on the field, you never know, but I expect if they're on the field, they're gonna make an impact. They're just too much better than all the other wide receivers on their respective teams.
And it's such a big game that they would have to be. You would think that if they're not already declared out at this point, that there's how can they not play unless. Now look, the Thomas thing is a little bit different because he just got the hamstring injury in practice this week. So, we have no idea. I mean, for all we know, it's really bad, and they're just hiding it. So we have no idea. But we'll find out if he plays. If he plays, and it's 5 minutes I mean, this is something that you better. Hopefully, you're not at church, and if you are, you better have your iPhone with you. But you have to make that call as soon as you find out that Thomas is playing. I mean, if he plays, if these guys play, you're starting them. But that's the question: is whether Thomas plays or not. I don't have a doubt that Jones is going to play.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of fantasy football, one of the great things about fantasy football in 2017 to 2018 is the app is very convenient for most of your platforms. Certainly Yahoo and ESPN. I can't really speak for CBS because I don't have any leagues on that platform anymore.
Okay.
But you just have to be ready to go. You'll know at least a half hour, an hour before the game they'll release whether or not these guys are playing, and then you can plan accordingly. So definitely have your backup ready to go, and just check a half hour before the game. And I mean, there is always the off chance. And famously, a couple of years ago, Julio played in a game, I think actually I'm confusing it with Megatron. Calvin Johnson played in a game where he had been hurt, and he didn't even get one look. He was clearly just being used as a decoy.
Yeah.
And that you never know, that could happen. But if Julio Jones or Michael Thomas is playing, you're starting them. You don't outthink yourself.
Yeah.
And if you get the unlucky fortune of them not really being a part of the offense, well then captain goes down with the ship. But they're the ones who got you to the finals. They were probably your first overall pick, so if they're playing, you start them.
And for Atlanta, it's too late. If you've used Tevin Coleman from time to time, you're definitely you'd have to be desperate to start him this week. Coming off the injury, you just have no idea what you're going to get from him, and it's not like he was getting an awful lot of reps anyway with Deshaun Freeman in there. So, last year, with Sarkisian, Coleman had a lot more touches, but this year, Sarkisian, you have Shanahan. Shanahan did a good job of getting those guys, including Tolman, almost starting numbers. Not happening this year with Sarkisian. So Coleman is definitely a player. I mean, you have to be, in my opinion, desperate to start him. So.
I definitely don't like him this week. I think you'd be better off with guys like Peyton Barber, Mike Davis, Bilal Powell.
Speaking about Bilal Powell, I mean, that's actually an under-the-radar. I think there are two under-the-radar running backs to start this week. You mentioned Powell because Forte and McGuire are banged up. So Powell all of a sudden becomes, well, wait a second, what if they both don't play or get barely the touches and Powell gets a lot of touches? And then also Mike Gillislee, because with Burkhead out, with the Bills playing this week, you know how the Patriots are. Gillislee hasn't had a touch in like 2 months, and he can go out there and get like 15 touches and 2 goal line carries for touchdowns.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. The problem with Gillislee is he could also be a non-factor. They could just lean on Dion Lewis and James White. I mean, neither one of them have that sort of. Neither one of them are your traditional big back. but I don't think they have a problem just giving Dion Lewis those goal line carries. But then again, he could have 2 or 3 touchdowns. So he's definitely more of the lottery pick, of the dart throw, a lottery ticket or a dart throw. Whereas I think you're probably not even in that bad of shape. I mean, certainly if Forte and McGuire don't play, I think Powell has the potential to be like a top 10 guy this week. But I definitely would feel safer with Bilal Powell than Gillislee. But Gillislee is an interesting one.
All right. Also, it looks like P. Ryan is a game time decision for Washington against Denver. Looks like Kelvin Benjamin's going to start. Kerwin Williams is expected to start, and Devontae Parker as well. Any of those guys interest you?
Well, I mean, honestly, you just haven't been able to trust Devontae Parker for most of the season, really. It's interesting. He's just one of these guys that for a couple of years now keep waiting for him to break out, and he'll have his odd, effective games, but he's just not someone you can trust, especially if you're in your, fantasy finals. And that also same goes, I'd say, for Kelvin Benjamin. Hopefully you have a better option because he just hasn't been consistent enough to be able to trust at this point in the season, I'd say.
Yeah, you can't count on Kelvin Benjamin even when he does play.
And same for P. Ryan. I mean, I don't, he definitely had a couple games where he got the work and he produced, but I don't know what to expect from him in his first game back.
All right, so there you go, Dan. It was great having you on this season. Look forward to bigger and better things next season. We've got a whole bunch of new ideas, and it should be a lot of fun for next season, and even during the off season. We're gonna have a lot of fun at some point during the off season, and getting in touch and getting everybody ready, especially because there are. I mean, one of these years, I definitely want to put together one of those, keeper leagues, whatever you call them.
Oh yeah,
that would be really fun. I want to get involved with one of those, and maybe we could, if all things go well, maybe we can even have time to get it done this year. But that's coming soon. Definitely want to put one of those together. So, Dan,
sounds good.
You've got your 3 championship games, so best of luck. And it was good having you on this season, and I look forward to talking to you again later on down the road.
Same here. Thanks for everything, Greg. I've enjoyed it.
All right, so that's Dan Weinrich, and that is going to do it here for our final fantasy football show on the Our Lads Football Radio Network for 2017. And best of luck to everybody out there on Championship Sunday and Monday. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. We, of course, are going to continue our college football bowl and playoff programming and content and NFL playoffs and all of that. So for all the other programming for the NFL and college football, as far as the regular season and the postseason is concerned, you stick right here on the Our Lads Football Radio Network. And don't forget, once the season's over, we're going to be hot and heavy for several months with free agency and the NFL draft. And that's what it's all about here at Our Lads, the NFL draft. So we look forward to that as well. So for Dan Weinrich and also, of course, for Jamal Murphy, I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in this season to our fantasy football coverage on the Our Lads Football Radio Network. We'll see you next time.